Thank you. So let me say a bit about who we are as the USAID Trade Hub. We are a program funded by the US government.
Okay.
We are a program funded by the US government, and we operate in Southern Africa to achieve 3 objectives. The first objective is to assist companies in Botswana, Eswatini, Lesotho, Malawi, Mozambique, Namibia, and Zambia to export to South Africa. The second objective is to assist companies in the 7 countries I mentioned, plus South Africa, to export to the US under AGOA. And thirdly, we support companies in South Africa that want to move capital and technology from South Africa to the rest of the region, given that most of the investors come and settle in South Africa first and then expand to the rest of the sub-region from here. And the ultimate aim really is about how we can increase economic growth within the region, working with the private sector to promote trade and investment. So we are grateful that you took your time to join us today. I'll share the program in a bit. Next slide, Zapiso. Yes, next slide, please. So a bit about the layout of the program today. So the program today is that we are going to start off with a session on the shipping products to South Africa. What do you need to know? And Vishnu is going to be sharing that with us. He's the National Customs Manager of Tenors Shipping. And then we'll move on to importing into the US. How do we get it right when we send our products to the US? And Michael Ford, who is the Vice President of Government and Industry Affairs at BDP International, will take us through that. We then open it up and have a discussion where your questions can be asked. So we encourage you to put your questions in the chat box so that when we get to the interactive discussion, we can then take your questions and have them answered by the panel of experts. And then we'll get on to the discussions about the next steps, and we close it up at 5 o'clock. Some house rules: if you can please keep your mics on mute, and also if you can save your questions for the session where we are going to be covering the session, the question and answer session, so that we give the key speakers the time that they need to get on with the show. So without much ado, let me invite Francis to introduce the panelists and to get the show on the road.
Thanks very much, Golden. My name is Francis Fraser. I'm the Portfolio Manager at the Hub for South Africa at the USAID Trade Hub. So if you can just move on to the next slide. We wanted to show the diversity of people who are joining us today. We've got quite a few people from South Africa, and then throughout the priority countries we work in across SADC, and then also a couple of people from the US. So thank you for joining us. I think people are still trickling into the session. Next slide, please. We've got a nice gender representativity with the ladies in the lead. And then in terms of the different sectors of different companies that are registered for the event, we've also got a nice mix of specialty foods, agribusiness, textile and apparel. And it really reflects, I think, the companies that we tend to work with and support, and the industries that are prominent within the SADC region and also have a competitive advantage in terms of exporting. And then we have a number of different service providers and supporters from the industry as well that are here to learn and to grow and gain experience from this that they can then pass on to other export firms that they work with. Thank you all for joining us. I know many of you have engaged with us over the last while, and it's great to see you as part of the group here. I did mention to the speakers that a lot of people on this webinar are good partners and friends of the USAID Trade Hub, so they can be comfortable presenting to us. Then, as you can see, we have a predominance of private companies and then several agencies of different governments that work in trade promotion across the region, who are key partners of the USAID Trade Hub. Thanks, Tabiso. Then, just to reiterate, if you could please post your questions in the chat box for us so that we can make sure that we cover those during the Q&A session. If we don't manage to get through them, we commit to sharing written feedback on the questions afterwards. And if we don't know the answers, we will do the same. But we've got such a superb pair of experts that are presenting for us today. First of all, our first presenter is Vishnu Menon. He's from Turner's Shipping, as Golden mentioned. And I think just to reiterate, Vishnu is a specialist in this area. He's been working for more than 20 years around customs, really understanding the South African legislation around importing goods into South Africa. He worked for the South African Revenue Service prior to joining one of the shipping companies. And I think it's key to know that they even sometimes consult him or refer people to him when they're not sure on how to deal with things. So he's a true expert that we can learn from today. Our second speaker is Michael Ford, based out of the US, and he's the Vice President of Government and Industry Affairs. Michael is really passionate about sharing his knowledge. He's got more than 40 years experience in the field with BDP International. And he also, he specializes in import and export documentation and regulatory compliance, but he also serves in a number of committees. And if you were early when you signed up for the call, you would have heard that he's very much tapped into what's happening in the US around the policy issues. So both of our speakers are leading experts, and we're in very good hands with a combined history of 60 years of experience in all of this. I'm looking forward to hearing what they have to share with us. Vishnu is going to start off with the presentation, then Michael, and then we'll move into the Q&A. Thank you, Vishnu. Over to you.
Thank you, Francis. Thank you, Dr. Golden Mohebe, for the warm welcome prior to the session. I really appreciate it. And yeah, thank you, Francis, for making me feel like a friend already. I do feel like I'm a true friend. So thank you for the introduction to the US and the US Trade Hub. On behalf of Turner Shipping, a warm welcome to everyone joining us. For those that are not familiar with Turner Shipping, I'm going to introduce our 120-year-old company with our corporate video. It will help you understand our business in South Africa and the network that we have in the country that transcends our borders in Africa. So yeah, and just enjoy our short video, please. Please, so.
And our range of... Welcome to Turner Shipping. We'd like to introduce our company and our range of services to you. In 1896, when sailing ships and ox wagons were the primary means of transport, Turner Shipping opened its doors as a customs clearing agent at the then newly established Port of Durban. Today, more than 120 years later, that port is one of the busiest on the African continent, and Turner Shipping is arguably the biggest privately owned clearing and forwarding company in Southern Africa. We have 12 offices in the main centers throughout South Africa and provide services in all of the Southern African countries. In partnership with BDP International, we also provide logistics solutions to clients on a worldwide basis. In keeping with the very high standard that the industry demands, Turner Shipping is both accredited by and a member of all the necessary local and international associations and organizations. We pride ourselves on our ethical corporate governance, with company policies which ensure ethics, compliance, and risk management in all that we do. Our IATA-approved air freight facility allows for service delivery to and from all the major airports on a national and worldwide basis. The special arrangement with BDP International allows for maximum efficiencies to be maintained on sea freight shipments. Road freight deliveries are undertaken for both local and international shipments, which attend to and conform to all Incoterm requirements, ensuring that cargo is successfully collected and delivered on a full or part load basis is the objective and foundation of our logistics excellence. Turners Shipping also provides a range of specialized value-added services, and our team of specialists are well versed in all the complex customs and excise regulations and requirements. We have established an excellent network of logistics partners throughout Africa, enabling us to operate effectively in a challenging environment. All shipments need to be covered by insurance, and through our business partners at JLT Group, we are able to provide our clients with a comprehensive and tailor-made marine insurance package. While customs clearing remains our core business, we pride ourselves on the expertise in the wider world of logistics management, ensuring both imports and exports are correctly and adequately attended to by our team of professionals. Trade finance is an additional value-added service offered by Turners Shipping. We provide procurement finance to both importers and exporters on a 120-day basis. Large and outsized project type shipments are managed from source to destination by our Project Freight division. Our nationwide warehousing division can attend to all storage and distribution needs on a national basis. In short, Turners Shipping offers a full range of logistics services to and from any location on the planet. Our real-time track and trace system enables us to provide up-to-date shipment status reports on a 24/7 basis. Through the Turners Training Academy, our own staff members and those of our clients can extend their skills and be educated in all aspects of the customs clearing and freight forwarding industries. We readily embrace sustainability and contribute to efforts as we look forward to a greener planet. Turners Shipping's promise to clients is to ensure that we always meet their requirements with industry professionalism and service excellence. We look forward to providing logistics management solutions for you.
Hello, sorry I'm late. I had trouble with downloading the Zoom application.
No problem. Welcome. Great, Vishnu, over to you.
Thank you very much. I know there was a lot that we spoke about in that video, but I can assure you that everything that has been said there is in fact true, and we're a pretty large organization in Durban. Guys, please feel free to engage me after the presentation as well. I'm giving you a personal invite to do so. If I have not specifically covered a topic that interests you or concerns you, you can phrase your questions to me. We'll be sharing our details later on. My presentation is brief and is a prelude to the main presentation later. It is an introduction to understanding the basics of imports and exports in South Africa. So the first slide is the busiest slide, I can assure you. The rest don't look like this. So if you look at this, you kind of envisage what the processes would be in South Africa. This is the most complicated and the one that we're dealing with later on for the AGOA export. And there's quite a few steps in it. The main thing about importing and exporting in South Africa is that you have to be registered with South African customs to do so. You must be issued with an 8-digit code, and that code is utilized to submit declarations to customs SARS. So step one, as you can see on the top here, is the manufacture of the product to be exported. And step two, moving on to the forwarding agent and the booking of the cargo to be exported. This particular slide, if there's a pre-inspection that's required, it may be necessary to do that before the export. Step 3 is the SOLAS and VGM. Now, SOLAS stands for, I've been warned against using acronyms. SOLAS stands for Safety of Life at Sea. And basically, it is an international standard that cargo needs to actually be verified, and the weight needs to be verified accordingly before it actually goes on board a vessel. So that's done prior to export. Customs EDI. EDI stands for Electronic Data Interchange. All of the declarations submitted to customs in South Africa is done on an electronic platform, and hence importers and exporters have to use a clearing agent to do so. It may be that importers and exporters do it themselves, but that's actually very rare. The ISF filing, that is done to show the US what cargo is going to be arriving under step 3. Step 4 is delivering the cargo to the carrier, and there's a notification process thereafter to the destination country telling that the cargo is arriving, and sharing the documents with them as well. Okay, so these are the types of trade agreements that I'm going to chat about today, and it's relevant to South Africa. The first is SACU, and it consists of South Africa and BLNE countries. It's taken a while because for the last 20 years I've been saying BLNS, and now I have to change that to BLNE countries, which is Botswana, Lesotho, Namibia, and Eswatini. The SADC trade agreement is 16 member countries, and some of them are not signatory to the actual trade agreement. And then today we're here to listen to Michael talk about AGOA. Okay, so these are the basic benefits. You know, I always have a thing that if I do a presentation, there's at least one thing that somebody needs to remember out of the presentation, and then I've achieved my goal. SACU is a customs union. So if we're looking at Botswana, Lesotho, Namibia, and Swaziland, there is no customs duty between these regions. So if we move cargo from Botswana to South Africa, there's no customs duty, there's only a VAT payment. There's no certificates required, and no SADC certificates or anything of that sort that's required. It is VAT payments only. And the same would apply if we're moving cargo from South Africa into Lesotho or Botswana. There'll be a VAT payment on the other side. So that's almost like a free trade zone between with no customs duty. We have to be very careful about this. When I say no customs duty, it's just a general duty. If there's excise or ad valorem taxes, that would be a separate issue. SADC, as I mentioned before, is the Southern African Development Community, and it's all of the countries except DRC and Angola, that if cargo is traded between them with the SADC certificate, it will be duty-free. I will touch on the extent of it later on to understand the full importance of it as well. And then obviously the AGOA agreement, which is preferential import rates into the US. So this is a basic document checklist. It's a non-exhaustive list, so I've just put it out there, and what would be required under these imports or exports. You'd notice at the bottom I talk about referee import permits and phytosanitary certificates and things like that. Now, South African customs have published what is called a prohibited and restricted list. It's an Excel document, and it's available on the SARS website. And this document details whether a product needs an import permit or an export permit or a health certificate, or it needs to be checked by a regulatory council. And it's quite detailed, and it will be useful if you're looking at it from a distance. So this is a clearing instruction. As I mentioned earlier, in South Africa, importers and exporters use clearing agents, so they have to give a formal clearing instruction to us as a clearing agent, and we utilize this when we're submitting an import or export declaration to SARS. As you can see, there's a lot of details. It's a legally required document. There's a prescriptive form or way of doing it, and this is how Turner Shipping sets out, but we have to cover everything that is in the policy document. It needs to be signed off, and the person's name needs to be detailed. So they are quite specific about it. If we submit a declaration to customs, the first document they ask for us when they are querying the document is a clearing instruction from an importer or exporter, and it has to be signed. So it is extremely important in the clearing process. This basically is an example of a commercial invoice. As you can see, it has to be in English. It has a basic description, and the description must give you an idea of what the tariff heading is. So generally, it must assist on how you're clearing it. It will detail the term of sale. It will detail the freight amount if necessary, and this helps us make a correct declaration to customs. This is an example of a packing list. Basically, it's useful to determine the exact weights when we are shipping or importing cargo, and we can make comparison against bills of lading using this document. So these are samples of certificates of origin. I spoke about requiring a SADC earlier on, and Michael will talk about an AGOA certificate of origin. The first example is a certificate of origin issued by the Chamber of Commerce here in Durban. The second is the SADC certificate of origin, and the third is the AGOA textile certificate of origin. The first certificate is a automated process where we can online get a certificate of origin from the Durban Chamber of Commerce. However, examples 2 and 3, they are manual documents. So it is completed, and then we have to take it down to customs to get it signed. So the bad news, it is a manual document. However, the good news is that Turner Shipping has the luxury of being 280 meters away from customs office in Durban. So our transit times are slightly less than everybody else. So yeah, that's a benefit to us. The next is an example of a road manifest. Now, this is normally used for road shipments across borders. It's used for import and the export process as well. This is an example of a bill of lading. This is a Turner Shipping bill of lading that we would normally issue. As you can see, it's endorsed by our clearing fraternity staff, and the standard trading terms and conditions appear on the document as well. This is the ISF filing that I mentioned earlier on. So basically, the US has laws in place that they need to know in advance what cargo is arriving. And we need to detail that in a prescribed format, and it's done in this sort of manner, as you can see here, with container details, where it's coming from, the type of container, and item numbers as such. Now, as much as that is a process that's in the US, in South Africa, we also have a very similar process called RCG. RCG also requires us to tell customs what is coming into the country. So we have to submit a manifest to them in advance to tell them exactly what's coming into the country, and that's done electronically in this sort of format as well. Very similar to the ISF process that I've just shown you now. This is an example of a vet import permit. The prohibited and restricted list that I spoke about earlier will determine whether a product requires a veterinary import permit. Normally, these are obtained by getting the veterinary permits from the country of export and applying to our authority, which is the Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fishery, for a vet permit. It's very specific on the product and tells you where it originates as well. This is an example of a phytosanitary certificate. There again, it's also required for specific products and issued by the same department, but a very different division. Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fishery. This is the fumigation certificate. The reason I put it out there is because very often you'd find that one would have wooden products in a container that needs to be fumigated, and especially going to the US, that this is a definite requirement. Okay, so this is an example of an SAD 500. This is the printed format of the declaration we make to customs. I've put up this example because it details an import from Mauritius of sweaters and jerseys, right? As you can see here on this field, there's only a VAT payment. And the reason for that is because the SADC certificate is declared here. And to put that into context, this is an extract from our customs tariff book. And as you can see here, jerseys and pullovers are mentioned here. The general rate is 45%. But if we are importing with the SADC certificate, there's no 45% duty. So it is a huge saving. Very much the same with t-shirts as well. T-shirts normally pay 45% duty, but under the SADC trade agreement, it will be duty-free. So the benefits that are there is really huge and can be used as a method of promoting your products to get them into South Africa. Okay, so thank you once again to the US Trade Hub for this opportunity to present today. Although short, I think I've enjoyed this moment in time. And please find our contact details on this slide. For myself, Vishnu Munian, our Managing Director, Blaine Kondia, our Forwarding Manager, Annette Pather. We have an accomplished team supporting us. And I'm sure we will be able to assist you with any inquiries or any business requirements that you may have. So next up, I will hand you over to Mr. Michael Ford. He's an accomplished educator and will now share the intricacies of AGOA agreement from a US perspective, addressing concerns that you may have when cargo arrives in the US. Thank you very much. Over to you, Michael Ford.
Vishnu, thank you very much. Thank you for the information. It's always great to learn. And, you know, that's part of what I did today was also learn a little bit of what it takes, right, to move goods in around South Africa and the region there, right? So, everyone, good day. My name is Michael Ford, as I think you've heard a few times. I'm here in the U.S., in the Philadelphia region, and I know it's your later afternoon, a little bit later in the morning for me, but I am so pleased to be able to give you some information. You know, Golden started off and talked a little bit about, you know, why we're here today, and that is to give us knowledge and educate. And so Vishnu told us about exporting, importing into the South African sub-Saharan region. Let me bring you over to the U.S., right? How do we have a successful movement of goods to our customers or to your customers in the U.S.? So Vishnu gave you a flow chart. I'm going to kind of pick up on that and extend it. So as you know, as you're doing a deal, you will look at step one, you're manufacturing your goods, you have a contract. Let me pick you up here where we have ISF. So it's an importer security filing. It's data and it's filed electronically, as Vishnu told. So what happens is that's required, and it's required because of what? And it's more because of customs, and it's really not only US, but around the world, need advanced data is what's coming in. Cargo gets loaded. Let's take it to step two. A carrier now files its information with the arriving country, happens to be the US. When we go into the US, you know, as Vishnu gave you acronyms, I'm going to do the same for you here and just get you a little bit of knowledge. In the US, we have an entry summary, which is a 7501, and an immediate delivery, which is a 3461. That is data that is submitted to customs. And what we're doing is we're making a declaration to US Customs saying, this is what we'd like to bring in from a commodity point of view. And the 3461 says, could you please release it to me? So this is what I'd like to bring in. Can I have cargo release? And as we move into step four, right, customs will look over the data. And here's really what we want. We want it released, right? And we want it moved and sent to our customer, right? However, just to kind of point out, if there's any type of risk, customs will do this examination. They'll possibly do a detention. If it's not correct, they'll seize it. But if everything's good, they'll release it and we move forward, right? So at the end of the day, what do we really want for a successful movement is, let's file our data. let's get to the carrier, get what they need to do. We make our declaration to U.S. Customs, and away we move on to our customers. So that's what I would call a successful clearance into the U.S. But let me take you into a little bit more detail of that we need to understand, right? So we've used this word AGOA, right? The African Growth Opportunity Act. And it is a cornerstone between the U.S., right, and the sub-Saharan region there. It's been for a while, right? And it's a program. Vishnu talked about duty-free in the region there and how you can achieve that. So AGOA gives you, in the region, as you export to the U.S., the same, what we would call duty-free access to the U.S. market. And that helps you reduce your goods and gets you to be very competitive with other companies around the world who may be selling the same goods, right? So AGOA gives us that duty-free treatment, right? And that's really what you're looking at, because that's going to give you that lower cost, right? The important thing that we do need to understand, and what's our goal is, do the goods that we're moving qualify and meet the rules of AGOA. So I'm going to give you kind of an overview of that so that you can understand. We need to make sure, because if we do not, then we are not subject to duty-free, and we have to pay the duties. And so it is important that we understand that goal. One of the other areas that we want to talk about that could be duty-free is called GSP, which is our Generalized System of Preferences. It's a trade program that does, again, lower your cost. However, I would point you more towards AGOA because AGOA is much more available to many, many other products. And so AGOA should be the preference that we always look to when we're in the sub-Saharan region to get duty-free, right? So in the US, goods arrive. Who's responsible? And we use the term, the importer of record is the party, that US Customs will look to regarding goods, making sure that they're correct, they're valued correctly, and that all the information is needed, right? So in the US, it is the importer of record. And one of the other requirements is you need to be registered in the system inside of the US Customs system. And that's part of, what BDP would do, just like Vishnu talked about, the role that Turner helping customers. It's part of what we do. We get you set up. One of the other pieces that you need to know is a U.S. importer needs to also have a bond, and that bond covers duty in case of non-payment. So registered in the system and having a bond gets you responsibility to allow goods to come into the U.S. Let me just take a quick snapshot. Vishnu talked and showed you the South African tariff and kind of the different rates of duties. So I'm just going to share with you one, right? So if we're moving handbags, right? As it says, handbags, this is our tariff system. It is how a good is declared to U.S. Customs. And if you were to say to me, what's the rate of duty? Here's what I would do. I would say, well, we have this number. And it's talking about handbags, and it's reptile leather, and we're going to pay 5.3% duty, right, to U.S. Customs. However, let's move a little bit over to the right, over here, and we can see this letter D. D stands for AGOA. And here's the important word, it's free, right? So instead of paying 5.3, our goods qualify, we have free duty. This other little one, 35%, is other countries that I'll just say are not friendly to the U.S. If goods were imported from there, they would be 35%. Sub-Saharan region, U.S., very friendly. You don't need to worry about that. So in this case, you can see there is a significant, lower cost if the goods qualify. And we're able to show that to the U.S. Customs. So what documents is required? What documents are required, right, for the U.S., right? Vishnu shared with us those sample documents, right? A commercial invoice. certificate of origin, a bill of lading, packing list. These are documents that are collected through the process. You as the exporter, you're responsible for a few of the documents, not all of them, right? The bill of lading is created by the ocean carrier, right? So you would create a commercial invoice. You would maybe work and get a certificate of origin, a packing list. And then there could be some additional documents required. Different government agencies in the US may require it. Just share with you the examples that, Vishnu, when he talked about like phytosanitary certificates or vets, those are all very common throughout the world, right? So depending on our product, there may be some additional documents or data that's required. When we look at the US, I'm just going to call out from an invoice. It needs to be in English. It needs to have the port of entry. It needs to know who is the company in the US importing, who's the exporter out of the sub-Saharan region, what are the goods, quantities. You can see what needs to be listed there. Very simple, easy, nothing difficult or complex. One of the other pieces of rules that is very important in the US is the goods need to be marked, and they need to be marked with the country of origin, right? Where were they manufactured? And when we do AGOA, that becomes really, really important. So I'll just share with you, when we say, who is the ultimate buyer, it's that party, right, that's going to receive your good. And in generally, every item needs to be marked and show to, we'll call the US consumer, of who made those goods in which country. This would just be an example or so of how things could be marked. If your country's not there, please don't take any offense. I'm just sharing, right, some examples that are out there. So as we do entry into the US, I easily said, yeah, we prepare an entry and we ask for cargo release. We're really going to be working with US Customs. US Customs really is the main government agency at the ports, right, that will manage the rules and regulations of many, many, many other government agencies. And they need to understand that, the US Customs. However, right, I do want to call out, the USAID team, Trade Hub team was kind enough to share in advance the different companies that are on the call today, as well as, what area of industry that you're in. And I see, a lot of food, as well as retail, right? So I wanted to call out a couple different specific government agencies just to show you what's going to be required here a little bit, right? So it's not everything, I'm just calling out a few. But what becomes very important for a successful import into the US? We need to make sure that we classify our goods properly. I shared with you that harmonized tariff system. That's very important, right? We need to make sure that we have a country of origin and that we know that, right? We need to make sure that we have our right values, right? What is the value for importing? Not the cost. There's a little bit of a distinction there, but that's very, very important. We need to make sure that we have all our documents available. And then all of that, right, gets reported. All those details get reported to US Customs in electronic fashion. So let me just call out our one government agency, FDA. What's that stand for? Food and Drug Agency, right? So Food and Drug, in addition to US Customs, has a lot of jurisdiction over a lot of different products. And so you can see, just sharing with you just kind of an overview of if you're moving goods to the US in any one of these listed areas, and there's more, you're going to be subject to Food and Drug, which will cause a little bit more work for all of us. It requires a little bit of additional data, right? So Food and Drug is managing drugs, food, biologics, cosmetics, which we have a couple cosmetic companies here, medical devices. So we need to deal with not only US Customs, but we also need to deal with Food and Drug. Food and Drug is going to ask for some additional information. So when we look at food and drug, there's some additional data that they're going to want. And why? Well, it's at the end of the day, it's all about security. They need to make sure that the goods, the food, or the drugs are safe for the U.S. consumer, right? So at the end of the day, we need to not only get a release from customs, but when our goods qualify under food and drug, we also need to get a food and drug release. Hey, textiles and apparel, we do have companies here today, so thank you for joining. I just wanted to go through a little bit about textiles and apparel. It is a significant amount of business that always has moved from the sub-Saharan region into the U.S. And you need to make sure, right, this becomes very important, that the goods that are moving are moved straight, from the region to the U.S. And we need to avoid what we call illegal transshipments. And those are goods that are coming from countries that are not eligible for the AGOA agreement, right? And so there's some falsification going on. So at the end of the day, we need to make sure, right, that we have the right forms signed off, and they're going to be presented to U.S. Customs, and they need to pass that approval. So doing that, knowing all of that, and this is kind of what we need to know to make sure that we avoid, right? So those are kind of the bad things that can go on. If we're moving apparel, in the U.S., apparel is a very high duty rate. Certain duty rates could be 15, 17, 20, 25%. That's an additional tax placed on the goods. If we're moving under AGOA, it's free. So we can see that is significant change in lowering your cost and allowing you to compete in the U.S. market, right? So it makes you very, very competitive. However, we need to make sure that our goods do qualify. And there's a lot of rules that we need to make sure. So when we talk about textile and apparel, it can at times be a little complicated, but I'm going to tell you that's why U.S. Trade Hub is there for you, to help you also understand that, right? So in the U.S., under AGOA, there's 10 different groups that we need to make sure where are we falling under. So are we delivering a finished product? Is it U.S. yarn and fabric? Is it sweaters? What is it, right, that we are manufacturing and would like to move to the U.S.? We're going to fall under one of these categories. So it is important that we get a little bit more information about textiles, apparel, right? We need to make sure, and we need to, we'll call authenticate, that the goods originate in the country, that they're properly marked, and that we follow the rules, that are set up in AGOA. So it is important as we move all of these items, right? Like I said, it can get complicated. We need to make sure where our components are coming from, where are we manufacturing, and all of that, right, is what makes up our goods. And I'm going to share with you that USAID Trade Hub, I've been working and talking with them over the past several days. If you're in this area, if this is your line of manufacturing, if these are your products, you're going to need a little bit more information than what I'm giving you right now. And I will share with you that the Trade Hub is going to have very specific future webinars, specifically textiles, apparel, and fabrics, and giving you that information on what is it that you need to know to have a successful journey from the sub-Saharan region to the U.S. marketplace for you. At the moment, I am leaving you my point of contact here for you. As Vishnu pointed out, where Turner Shipping in the region can help you, BDP is here to help you in the U.S. market. It is what we do. Turner is in the South African region there. BDP, we are across the U.S. as well as the world, but specifically in the U.S. This is my contact details. I am here to help you. And as we end and go through Q&A and we leave, I'm sharing with you my contact so that any questions, concerns, more information, I'm here for you. So with that, Francis, I am done sharing my screens at the moment. I may have to share some more information as we go through the Q&A.
Super, thank you. It's a pity we can't give you a proper round of applause like in the old days. Both of you deserve a warm round of applause. Thank you for sharing so much valuable information with us. There are plenty of questions flowing in, so I'm going to get started straight away. The first one, I think, Vishnu, is probably for you. Is a road manifest required if you import from Mozambique to South Africa?
Francis, yes, yeah. It is processed, and it is processed by the agent. So it's not something that you should be awfully concerned about when you're sending goods. When the truck arrives and meets the agent at the border post, they will process the road manifest together with the customs import bill of entry, and the cargo will cross over. It's just a two-step process, and that is why I'm talking about it. Okay, but it is processed by the agent. Thank you.
Thanks, Vishnu. Then there was a question about, are there any specific documents that are needed if you want to export tomato sauce, like ketchup, in either plastic or glass to Botswana? I think that's for Vishnu as well.
Okay, is that from South Africa into Botswana?
Correct, sorry, yeah.
Okay, so are we exporting ketchup from South Africa? And you would require on the Botswana side their sort of requirements. There may be a health certificate that they request, but it is something that we can look at and give a specific answer as we engage our counterparts in Botswana.
Great, thanks Vishnu. So I think with each product and each specific item that's going into a different market, there'll be slightly different requirements. So if there's any specific questions on the products that you are exporting or importing, please reach out to Vishnu for regional trade. Then we have another question. Are there any additional documents required for leather products? I assume that's leather products from the region into South Africa. Oh no, yes, it's from Lesotho to South Africa, I think.
We would still require the normal veterinary permits, because actually when we import leather into South Africa, there is on our prohibited and restricted list, there's a requirement for a veterinary permit. The same permit will apply when you're crossing over into South Africa at the border posts as well.
Okay, so there are some specifics there that you can look into with Vishnu. Then we have another question, this one for Michael. Who is responsible for obtaining the IRS number in the US?
Well, you know, if you're in the U.S., you do have what we call an IRS number, which is our tax number for the corporation. So the U.S. importer is responsible, and they should know that. That's part of the requirement. I would offer, though, and I didn't mention this, but I'll add, so can a foreign entity be an importer into the U.S.? And the answer is yes. To do that, you wouldn't have a tax ID number. Customs would give you their assigned number, and that would identify who you are.
Okay, so could you elaborate a bit on that? Would you have to set up a company and a bank account, or how would you institutionalize that?
So, Francis, on that question, so let's assume that we do have a company from the region who would like to be the U.S. importer. Are they permitted? The answer is yes. Do they have to set up a legal entity? And the answer is no. Okay. What they do need to do, and I mentioned this, is they do have to get a bond. They do have to get a customs assigned number. And then they do need to appoint someone in the U.S. to speak for them. So if U.S. Customs has questions, U.S. Customs wants to speak to someone in the U.S. So who will be representing them in case of Customs has questions regarding the import or the product? Someone needs to be available. Many times like BDP could do that. But that's some additional role and responsibility, but it is doable. Or they could assign someone else to be their, what they call is more of their agent in that regards.
Yeah. Great, thanks for clarifying that. Then I think you can take this one as well, Michael. How long do ships take to get to the US from South Africa? Or
Yeah.
Vishnu, I don't know.
There's more than one way, right? That's what happens. And I'll share with you, it could be 28 days, it could be longer. Do your goods maybe make their way to Europe and then into the US? Or do they go straight and direct by vessel? So there's various ways, various options, and at the end of the day, it's various cost. So if you're looking for cheap, it's going to take you longer. You get what you pay for, as always, right? That's how we do things in the world, or how it should be. If you pay for a premium service, then you should get the fastest time. If the shipping cost is so expensive and you need to keep it as low as possible, it's going to take you longer to get there.
Mm-hmm. So maybe Vishnu, do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I just would reiterate what Michael said as well. I mean, direct sailing or transshipments, it's down to cost and efficiency as well. And which sort of shipping lines do you prefer from your historical preferences and levels of service that you've been granted as well?
Yeah.
So there isn't a standard answer to that. Also, there's different sailing ports that one would go to in the US. And looking at the size of it as well, it's going to be different times for different sailing ports as well.
Yeah, you're going to go to the West Coast, East Coast, Gulf. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you. This one's quite specific, Vishnu. I supply garments to South Africa from Eswatini. SARS request a DA59 to be filled and stamped by the Swaziland Revenue Authority. Is it a compulsory document?
Yeah.
For the Eswatini Revenue Authority?
Yeah, it's actually a weird sort of process. But what a DA59 is, that South African Customs created a document, and a DA stands for Douane and Assains. That's the Afrikaans name for Customs and Excise. And the DA59 is their certificate of origin. So they had a prescribed format of completing a certificate of origin. Effectively, it is just that, a certificate of origin, and you take it to Eswatini and get it stamped. It's something you can challenge if you want to. I guess with some border posts, because of the practice that has been prevailing, they continue to do the same sort of thing without fully understanding the reasons behind it. So yeah, we could possibly address that with SARS management and see what the response is, if that's the case.
Okay, thank you. Then we've got a couple of industry-specific questions. The one is on oils and chemicals, so I know that's one of the areas you specialize in. Are there any duties that can be reduced for oils and chemicals from South Africa or Southern Africa to Houston, Texas? I think that's an AGOA question.
Yeah, we would want to check the classification that I shared with you and then let you know specifically if it's under AGOA. We'd have to prove that those goods originate from that region. Just because we're shipping from that region doesn't qualify us. We need to look at the product and making sure that it qualifies under there. And if it does, there's a very good chance that it could be duty-free.
Great, thank you. So,
and I would just add that, chemicals and oil, when you look at the US, there are some special other tariffs that also could apply. So it's not so easy to look at it, but there are opportunities, and it may be more than one opportunity to get duty-free.
Okay, great. So that question is from Neil Lutz. I think if you want to engage further, then there could be some direct more investigation.
He's one of our clients, and I'll address that with him. Thank you very much.
Okay, good stuff. Then we've got another specific question around exporting marijuana for medical use to the US. So that's cannabis, medical cannabis. What would be required? Is it possible, and what would be required?
Yeah. Well, in the U.S., we're in a state of flux here because the federal government declares. I understand it's medicine, so we're going to fall in under Food and Drug. And the requirements out of there. So when you operate under Food and Drug, what needs to be known is where was this product manufactured? Are you registered with Food and Drug? And so if you're meeting some of the Food and Drug requirements, the answer is yes, right? But to do that, it's more of making sure that we understand where the goods are being manufactured and that you're registered and that all the information that Food and Drug is aware of you. If none of that exists, then the answer is no, it's not permitted.
Okay, so for a medical product, I understand there's a two-stage process. You need to register with the FDA, and in some instances, you have to actually have the product approved. So the first step is definitely at least the registration. Right, then we have a question. Is there a way the transportation of items such as isolation gowns that does not exceed the actual price of the garment? Sorry, okay, so just to rephrase, I think the question is, sometimes the garment is quite a low-cost item. Masks can be 80 US cents, a gown could be $6. Is there an affordable way of transporting low-value items via air freight?
To the US?
To the US, yes, sorry.
Air freight's very expensive right now, right? Due to COVID-19. The only way you're going to move goods right now really is all cargo, and those rates are very expensive. So taking a low value good and putting it on aircraft is probably going to be very expensive right now. The cheapest way is going to always be ocean when you look at it and you break it down per unit. However, it's going to also add some time to it. Air freight's quick. That's why we're doing things, and for speed. But there's not like a low cost option for air. It's very expensive right now. There's limited space, limited service. All of that's just driving up the cost of air transportation.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Then are there a means of connecting manufacturers with reputable agents or customers for market access, minimizing the risk of being scammed? And if this question is difficult, I think it might not be something for you to respond to, but you're welcome to give it a go if you want to.
France, is that for the US? Yeah?
Yeah.
So US people scamming? No. How do we legitimize, right? Is there an easy connection? Or what we would call is more matchmaking, right? Is there a way that we can, if we're in the sub-Saharan region, how can we work with some US companies and identify them that will serve our needs? Mm-hmm. I don't know of a direct link that you could say, here it is. People go onto the internet and try to establish. I would probably offer one of the ways to do that is to try and work maybe with some of the U.S. governments, and I don't think USAID Trade Hub can do that, but there could be some other government agencies that connect up that what we would call matchmaking, and make that a better connection for you. It's
I think
we talked about, yeah.
Sorry, Michael. Yeah, I think maybe Golden, do you want to chip in on that one in terms of the role that we play at the USAID Trade Hub, in terms of how we do part of that? I would say that one check would be to have a reputable agent, and I think Michael mentioned that earlier, representing you in the US. And obviously the USAID Trade Hub has some firms that we work with in terms of that. And then obviously having the correct company registration and FDA registration if you're in food and drug, depending on that, ensuring that whoever you're engaging with is probably formalized correctly. But Golden, do you want to expand on that a bit in terms of the role of the hub, the USAID Trade Hub?
I think Cosmas is best placed to answer that question. Cos, are you on the line? I think you should take that.
Yes, it is. Cosmas Mamunzi is the portfolio manager for Namibia, Botswana, and Malawi at the USAID Trade Hub, and he has extensive experience in supporting companies from the Southern Africa region with accessing the US market. So please, Cos, we're in your hands.
Thanks, Francis, and good afternoon, everyone. Right. So in terms of the role that USAID Trade Hub plays, I could split it into 2 or 3 elements. So the first one is to support in terms of linkages, participating in trade events where one can meet with buyers in the United States. So that's one avenue that we use. So we've managed to support participation at food trade shows, ingredients trade shows, textiles and apparel trade shows in the past. And obviously due to COVID, we doing it virtually. And one of the ways is via virtual webinars. So that's one angle. Then the other angle is through ongoing linkages. We have established some relationships with certain buyers, certain importers in the US. So from time to time, we sometimes get inquiries, and from time to time, we just share information of exporters from this region we share with them, and then they get connected. So I would say those are the key avenues that we pursue to provide the linkages with the US market. And then over and above that, we also create awareness in terms of US market requirements. So working with US-based entities such as the Registrar Corp, for example, to address issues around FDA, how one gets registered, what are the processes, what are the implications of non-compliance. We work with partners to address such issues so that exporters are ready, exporters are aware of what to expect. So I would say in a nutshell, Gordon probably could add on to that, but in a nutshell, that's part of the role that USAID Trade Investment Hub plays.
Thanks very much, Cosmos, for highlighting our role and some of the opportunities there. We've got a similar question related to the South African market in terms of importing into South Africa for hibiscus teas and jams. And so we follow similar approaches to accessing buyers in South Africa. I would highlight that we have a virtual business-to-business linkage event happening next week. And Tsepiso will post the registration link in the chat box if you're interested in attending that. If you're not already attending, please do. There will be a few buyers there, but it will give you the opportunity to also understand what South African suppliers are looking for, what South African buyers are looking for in their suppliers. And so there will be a panel discussion around no holds barred, what do you need to do to get into South African retailers, food manufacturers, and e-commerce businesses. Then I have another question from Neil. What trade agreements are in place for Mozambique? Vishnu, do you want to chat to that?
Yes. Yeah, maybe I didn't highlight it enough. That is in place for Mozambique. So if we're importing cargo from Mozambique into South Africa, with a SADC certificate, it will be duty-free. Once again, it's only the general duty, and it wouldn't cover ad valorem or excise taxes. So we have to be specific on the product that we're importing as well. If you're making reference to exports, we would have to check with the Mozambican counterpart what the import rate for SADC would be. Remember, duties don't always reciprocate. So although I've made mention and says that every single product in the tariff book is duty-free under the general rate for SADC, the same may not apply for the respective countries as well. We have to verify and ensure that the SADC rate is in place, and in fact it is duty-free as well. So yeah, there is a process that we need to follow.
Great, thank you. Then there's a question from Tabo. Tabo, I might ask Tsepiso to unmute you, just to elaborate a little bit. The question is for Vishnu. It is, do you also have offices in Namibia, looking at the fact that Namibia is closer to the US than South Africa. So I think the question is really, is there a viable trade port from Namibia to the US, given that it's on the west coast of Southern Africa? Maybe just to confirm, Thabo, have I interpreted your question correctly?
Yes, you have. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so Turner Shipping is a South African company. We do have agents that will represent us in Namibia and will assist if we have any inquiries. Having said that, the question was asked earlier about trade routes and shipping lines. It may not always turn out that because Namibia is closer to the US, that would be a preferred trading or shipping route. There may be shipping lines that may not call at that specific port. So we have to go back to which port and which shipping lines are being used as well. So I think that is an important fact when making that decision. It won't always be down to the distance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, no, understood, 100%. Just that, you know, I would think, obviously, prices is a factor. And,
Yes,
you know,
sir.
the less we get, the prices to get to the States less costly means that we can compete in the market. And also from a layman's perspective, you'd think that the ship goes around and then goes past us in Botswana, then goes to the States.
Yes, very much so.
You
No,
can
it's
dock
down
in
to the popular
Namibia.
routes, sir. It's down to the popular routes, yeah. So that's where it is. And there has to be import and export trade for that ship to come to that port.
Right. Whilst we are there, I had a second question. Maybe I can just jump into it about the distance. How long does it take, you know, shipping? It takes about 50 days to ship to Durban from China. So how long does it take, you know, to get to the States? That was my last question, Francis. Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, we haven't followed vessels. Are you making specific reference to Namibia to the States or South Africa to the States?
No, let's do Durban
South Africa to
just
the
as an
States.
example. Yeah.
Yeah, Michael did mention 28 days for a direct sailing. All depends on the vessel and the route and which port it's calling at as well. So there are various factors that will affect that. But roughly said, about a month generally.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks very much for clarifying that one. Then, where can we access the import duties payable in the USA? So, Michael, I guess it's how can people actually?
So there is there's a website that you can go on. It's searchable. It's free. So you can put your description of your product, and it'll bring you to the U.S. tariff system. So, Francis, when we're done, I can share that back with you, and then you can share it out to the audience. If that may be the easiest thing to do.
Sure.
So instead of buying paper, it's electronic, and it'll share with you the duties. And then, you know, I think we went through a little bit of an exercise on how to understand whether your goods are under AGOA or free or not. So,
right. Thank you very much.
From a South African side, the same is available on the SARS website, and I can share the same link with you. So everyone will have a tariff PDF format for themselves that they can make reference to.
Thank you. I think if you've got time, maybe at the end you could just pop it in the chat box so people have it immediately available, or I know Cosmos could do that. He knows the sites as well. But we can also share that when we distribute the presentations and the recording of the session. I see there are a few questions coming in about whether we'll be sharing the PowerPoint slides. We will definitely be doing that, and we will also be sharing a recording of the session. We'll just do a quick edit on that, so we won't send that straight away. Thanks, Cosmos. I see he's already posted the site for the US tariffs there. Okay, then we've got another question around market access within the region and to the US and AGOA for PPE, so environmentally friendly reusable masks. Since Cosmos has been put on the spot, I think I need to share the love with our other portfolio manager. He's in charge of Eswatini, Lesotho and Mozambique, and comes from the textile and apparel sector. Do you want to just share a little bit about the work that we're doing in terms of promoting access for PPE in the region and in the US? Assuming Sim is here.
Sorry, Francis. Sim didn't manage to join. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, I can. Thanks, George.
Maybe Marina can actually take that question. the country for Lesotho.
Thank you, George. That would be great. Tsupiso, we're giving you lots of background production work here. Can you unmute Marina, please?
Thank you very much, Frances, and greetings to everyone. Yes, we have a scheme that we are running on production of PPE in the region. We have 27 companies that we're working with across Lesotho, Botswana, South Africa, and Eswatini. And these companies are predominantly in the apparel production sector. We selected these companies because of their productive capacity and skills that they already have to sort of retool and produce PPE. This was because in the early stages of COVID-19 issues, we had some disruptions that caused most countries to shut down, to do lockdowns. And a lot of people were losing their jobs. And we looked at how we can get companies to start producing again. So that's how we launched it as a pilot, starting with a couple of companies. And it's been doing very well. We've had companies producing and exporting to the region, selling in their domestic markets. We have some that are exporting out of Eswatini and Lesotho into South Africa. We have recently picked out of those 27, 14 companies that we are supporting to also export to the US market, and working with a company in the US market. It's called Register Corp, to help us to list them or to register them with FDA. I think in one of the presentations, the role of FDA was explained very clearly. So we're helping to register them with FDA as the USAID Trade and Investment Hub. And some of them have received some waivers to date. And we're also working on linking them with the market. We have engaged some agents in the market to assist in forging the necessary linkages between these suppliers from the region, the Southern Africa region, into the US market. And we're making good traction in that space as well, in that we're starting to see orders coming in from the US market. Maybe let me say we're starting to see quotations coming in expressing interest to source from the region. So that is where we're at this point in time. And yes, PPE presents a very good opportunity for regional exporters to explore both the US market and the South Africa market for other countries that are around South Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marina. Appreciate all the insights into that scheme that we're working on. Then we have a question from Lucy, and Tsupiso, I might need you to unmute Lucy, just to clarify. The question is, are there any certificates required for exporting wooden carvings and curios? And I think that's into the US, but I just want to confirm that. Is Lucy still?
Yes.
Thanks.
Oh, I'm right here. Yes. Yes, I think I would want to know for both US and even South Africa.
Great. Thank you.
Francis, you want me to start?
Sure. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, so in the US, I didn't go through it, but there is another government agency that is takes jurisdiction over wood and wood products. And it's called our LACY Act, L-A-C-Y. And so there's a lot of additional data that's needed to the origin and the species of the wood that needs to be collected and submitted to U.S. to the government, to customs and the other government agency to help you there. And so to explain it all here is difficult, but I can share with you, the data requirements there. So, if a product is made up of multiple wood origins. We need to break all of that down. It's, what the U.S. is looking for was the wood harvested from endangered species. Where was it harvested? It needs to make sure that everything is proper. It's not difficult. It's just, if you're used to it, this is information that you're always going to need to know.
Thanks, Michael. And then Vishnu for South Africa.
I think on the import side, generally, as Michael's mentioned, it would need a sort of phytosanitary, but normally it's checked by the plant inspector in South Africa. So you need a certificate to confirm that the wood conforms. Having said that, it's also important to look at the classification of the product, because not in all cases will it be treated like a raw material. It may be considered a finished product and may be classified under a tariff heading that would not require that sort of check. So I think the specific product needs to be shown to me, and then we can, based on the tariff, decide what the requirements set out will be.
Great, thanks very much, Vishnu. So we've got lots of questions still to be answered, and we're approaching 10 to 5. I have the very time-specific deadline related to load shedding hitting me at 5 p.m. So your moderator will not be here once the load shedding hits. So I think we do need to try and finish off on time. I will do one more question, which I think there are two components to it around country of origin rules related to third country fabric, and I'll elaborate on those. But just to say that just to reconfirm some of the next steps, we will be sharing the recording. I still see some questions coming on that, and we will be sharing the PowerPoint presentations, including the contact details for Turner's Shipping and BDP. So if you've got additional questions, we can handle those directly, and also with the support of the USAID Trade Hub. So if your questions are not answered, please do not fear. We will answer them. So I think the first question was about, if I manufacture clothing in South Africa with fabric imported from Europe, Asia, or Brazil, would my products qualify for AGOA? If not, are there any rebates that I could qualify for? That's quite specific because it's South Africa, not one of the less developed countries in the region.
So Francis, this is Michael. I would just add that, it's more of the consultant answer. It depends, right? How much of the product comes from Europe, and what components, and, so it would have to be looked at specifically, and then go through does it meet the requirements of AGOA, meaning 35% or more from a country and things. Can you bring outside components in and manufacture? Yes. But there would be more detail needed and better specifics.
Mm-hmm. Vishnu, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think from a South African perspective, when it comes to rebates on making garments, it's very specific on the type of garment you're making and the actual textile that you're using to manufacture the garment. So I think a lot more specifics would be required for the purpose of deciding whether it is rebatable or not. Yeah, so I think on that level, I need to have a bit more details on that.
Thank you. So I think Kaz also popped in the chat box that South Africa is not eligible under the third country fabric provision we're not a less developed country. So there are some specifics there, and as per earlier, please reach out to us and to the speakers to clarify any other specifics you had. There was also one around, do the textile requirements also apply to fabric used on sofas? So this is a furniture manufacturer that's asking that question. Maybe just a quick answer there. Vishnu, do you want to take that one?
Sorry, Francis, can I get that question again?
The question was whether the textile provisions apply to furniture. So if there's fabric being used on a couch or a sofa, would that apply?
Okay, so we have a third schedule rebate in South Africa. It's called an industrial rebate. And basically, it's very industry specific. So if you're using a particular fabric to make up furniture, there may exist provision in it. If there isn't provision, you would need to apply to the Department of Trade and Industry and kind of motivate why you require it and why you aren't able to purchase that fabric locally. So I think we have a local industry that may oppose quite a few oppositions on importing fabric if they are able to supply the fabric locally. So yeah, it has to be a bit more specific, and maybe I can give a complete answer on that. But obviously a way forward as well.
Great, thanks Vishnu. I think I'll leave it at that on the questions, but please reach out to us if you want to pursue a specific discussion further. I would like to draw your attention to the chat box. Tsepiso posted the USAID Trade of Agricultural and Specialty Food Buyer-Seller Linkages virtual trade event. It's happening on Wednesday afternoon next week. The registration link is there. Please pre-register on using the registration link if you'd like to join in. It will be a new approach to doing a B2B event. So we're going to learn along with everyone. Then we have a number of other webinars coming up that I'd like to draw your attention to. We have a series of webinars around AGOA. So some of the questions you're asking around the specifics of different products going into the US and what the rules are on that. We've got the next 3 Mondays is a 3-part series of AGOA webinars coming up. A general introduction with a focus on FDA registration. Then the next Monday on textiles and apparels, and then on the 31st of August, food and beverages, and we'll go into a bit more detail on some of the provisions and to answer more questions in terms of those. With we have a US customs lawyer who will be part of all of the sessions, and a panel of other speakers that bring different experience around the topics. So please look out for those. We will be sharing those invitations. You can also reach out to Tsepiso or Mabatu for more information on those. And their details will be shared at the end of this presentation. I think that that concludes my assignment, except to say thank you very much for the enthusiasm and the preparation, which took a lot of, really, you guys were meticulous in terms of the time you spent and the effort you put into preparing. Thank you to both of you very, very much. I would like to hand over to George McCory. He is our Deputy Chief of Party. You heard from him briefly earlier. George is going to close off for us with some closing remarks. Thank you, George.
Thanks very much, Francis. And if I could also reiterate the thanks to our 2 presenters, Vishnu and Michael, for a wonderful job. I think the number of questions that are still remaining goes to emphasize the importance of this session and the enthusiasm and to find out what the issues are out there and how we can export, or exporters can enter into the South African market as well as the US market under the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA Trade Preference Program. We will continue as the USAID Southern Africa Trade and Investment Hub to offer more ways of interacting with experts in the areas that are of interest to our exporters, our partners in the region. I would also like to encourage all of you to use the resources that we and the services that were highlighted here, working with Michael and Vishnu and the team, including us at the US Trade Hub, so that you can be able to make informed decisions going forward. Let me also encourage the participants themselves, all of us here, to continue to interact amongst ourselves. There's a lot of information, very good information that is within us. Some of the questions that we're asking here can actually be answered by some of the participants that we have here. So please continue to interact. We need to cross-pollinate ideas and continue to learn from each other. We have a lot of information from our experiences. So let's share that. Let me again just highlight the fact that we do have USAID Trade Hub. We do have representation now in every country that we operate in. So the 8 countries that were highlighted earlier, which is South Africa, where we are best, and we have representation in Botswana, we have representation in Eswatini, Lesotho, Mozambique, Zambia. Who did I leave out? Namibia. So you can actually then be able to talk to the person that is near you before you move on. Oh yeah, in Malawi. Thanks, Dagro. I had forgotten Malawi. So we do, and Dagro, Musiska is the country representative for the USAID Trade Hub in Malawi. You can be able to get, we will actually provide information on that, on who is representing or who can actually, you can reach out to in the countries that we operate in. Finally, I do hope that you all found this worth your while, and I would like to thank you very much for attending. I know we are very busy, and it's an effort for you to be attending this webinar, considering that it was long, but I do hope that you found it worth your while. As was highlighted earlier by Francis, we do have a lot of other USAID, Southern Africa Trade Investment Hub organized webinars coming up, which we all doing this in an effort to provide you with all the information that you require. So please look out for those and make an effort to attend, and keep in touch so that we can be able to be of good service to you. Thank you very much.